Gravedigger, a Day Brandstetter Mystery, Book 6. Author, Joseph Hansen. Publisher, Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 14. The canyon was hung with rags of sooty cloud. This afternoon, the rain fell steadily and cold. Anything able to turn green had turned green. Oaks, pines, chaparral. The grass among the rocks was thick and high. The potholes in the twisting roads were wider today, deeper. But the Jaguar didn't let him feel them. It took the bends, elbows, the steep lifts and falls of the roads without effort. Even so, his good arm grew tired. His hand on the wheel ached. He stopped on a plank bridge above the tumbling, muddy stream and studied again the map he'd picked up at a shiny bookstore in Santa Monica. He had to squint to make out the map. Burro Trail was no more than a thin scribble, maybe a quarter-inch long. It was far back and from the roads he'd prowled along the other morning. He hadn't come within miles of it. There had been no chance that he'd sight the rolls, the panel truck, or the old Impala. He laid the map on the empty seat beside him and sat flexing his stiff fingers and frowning to himself. He had passed and left far behind the crossroads with the filling station, general store, building yard. Should he drive back there and ring Salazar? Being alone when he found Westover didn't worry him. Gellard didn't worry him. But what about the girl? If she was Serenity, how sane was she? How stable? Maybe, after all, she had been the one who tried to kill him. He gave his head a shake. This wasn't like him. This case was humdrum. Attempted fraud on an insurance company. He'd handled 100 of those in his time. More than 100. The car smash and his aches and pains were getting to him, and his goddamn age. And the gruesome background of this one. He saw those shaky blue buildings again, out there in the desert, the sandy holes where the girls had been buried. He shivered. Though the heating system of the car worked well, he wasn't even wearing his jacket. He wished he knew what Cecil had learned at Perez. Had the Impala come from Jay's dusty lot of high-gloss jalopies? The hell with it. He was acting like an old woman. He started the car and rumbled it off the loose planks of the bridge and went to find Burro Trail. It climbed a box canyon, as Anna Westover said. 2 ruts that the new spring grass was doing its best to make invisible. The rainy daylight was dying fast, helped by tall trees, pines, and pine oaks. He peered past the batting of the windshield wipers, hoping Westover had switched a light on that would lead him to the cabin. But there was only gloom. He didn't want to show headlights. He wanted to arrive with as little warning as possible. In the TR, this would have been unthinkable. It was noisy. The Jaguar's engine purred like the big cat it was named for. Powerful, no need for bluster, was what he saw now. Back among the trees, the straight line of a roof. He slowed the car, inching it along the bumpy ruts, keeping in his sights that horizontal line until he was sure. He stopped the car, switched off the ignition, set the gears. He stretched awkwardly to paw his jacket off the rear seat and got out of the car. Under the chill sifting of the rain, he worked his good arm into the jacket sleeve and hiked the left side of the jacket up over his shoulder. Over the arm in the sling, he crouched to set the handbrake, straightened up, and quietly closed the door. He stood for half a minute, gazing up the trail. Had Lovejoy sent that letter? Had Westover picked it up? He sure as hell hoped so. He drew a long breath, expelled the breath that began to climb the trail. Even in the growing dark, it wasn't hard to see the marks cars had made, coming down out of the woods and going back up into the woods. He followed the marks, slipping sometimes in the mud. The house was further than he had judged. He encountered the Impala first. Facing him, front fender crumpled, dripping rust in the rain. The headlamp Smashed beyond the Impala stood the rain-glossed rolls, and beyond that, half in some kind of ditch, tilted Gallard's panel truck. The light was bad, the paint faded, as Selma Gallard had said, but he could make out the yellow lettering as much of it as showed above the dripping brush lard, and below that, fitted furniture. He didn't know why it put him in mind of an abandoned hearse. The cabin looked deserted. It wasn't sounds told him that the slap of a screen door, the drum of heels on a porch. A rifle went off. The slamming noise it made echoed in the rainy hills. A bullet whined past his ears. Someone shouted, "Hold it right there, mister!" Dave stepped behind a tree trunk. The voice called, "You're on private property. You're trespassing. Get off!" "Charles Westover?" Dave called. Could it be Westover? It sounded like a boy's voice. The rifle slammed again. The bullet hit the tree trunk and knocked loose bark that fell on Dave. He brushed it out of his hair. He shouted, "I'm from Banner Insurance." The rifle went off again. But the bullet didn't sing, and it didn't strike anything. He thought it had been fired into the air, and he couldn't make sense of that. He shouted, "We wrote you a letter about your claim. Did you get the letter?" The gun went off again. The bullet hit the tree high up. A pine cone rattled down through wet branches and hit the ground with a splash. Dave shouted, "I need your signature on some forms so we can pay you." Why was he saying these things? Why didn't he just turn around and leave? He turned around to leave, but someone was in his way. Someone scrawny. The blonde girl, in her raveled sweater, dirty jeans, and dark glasses. The rifle fire had been only covered to let her reach him. A big black machine pistol was in her little hand, and she pushed it into his sore ribs and said, "Not this way. That way. We're going in the house." "What is Westover so afraid of?" Dave said. "You think about being afraid," she said. "Don't worry about him. Move, move." She jabbed him with the gun barrel and pushed him. He wished she sounded nervous. She sounded confident, even bored. He walked ahead of her, watching his step on the rough and muddy ground in the dying light, as if his falling or not falling were a matter of importance. He grinned sourly to himself. "You're Serenity," he said, "aren't you?" "That doesn't mean it's over," she said. "It's only just beginning. Climb the steps." "Why aren't you with Azrael?" he said. She laughed and poked the gun hard into his lower back, right against the spine. "Climb," she said. He climbed. The stairs were well made. Paint had worn off them, but the planks were thick and sturdy. Meant to last. He thought about Gallard, hanging onto this place in the frail hope of getting Westover back here some sweet, impossible day. Only it hadn't been impossible, had it? It had just been all wrong. At the top of the stairs, Dave lifted his eyes. The rifleman was scrawny too. He held the rifle under his arm, pointed at Dave. The roof overhang made the porch dark, so there was no way to see his features. He looked as blonde-haired as Serenity, and his eyes were so pale they seemed to glow. He backed through the cabin door, keeping the rifle barrel leveled at Dave. The girl pushed Dave ahead of her across the porch and through the door into her room. It was pitch dark. The door closed. A match was struck, and the flame showed Dave, a second man, slightly gray-haired, bending above a kerosene lamp on a table of thick, polished planks. The man touched the flame of the match to the wick of the lamp, and the wick took fire softly. The man blew out the match and set a slim, smoky glass chimney over the flame. The top part of the man's right ear was missing. He looked at Dave sadly and slumped down on a spooled maple sofa with faded chintz cushions. He looked thoroughly beaten. "Are you Lovejoy?" he said. I work for him, Dave said. I'm Brandstetter. That's good, the rifleman said. That means we've got a name to contact at the insurance company. That's very good. Where did you leave your car? Is there anyone in it? You came alone. His pale eyes were crazy, and he smiled. It was a wide smile, meaning nothing. He had cut off his holy man hair and beard, but there was no mistaking him. You're Azrael, Dave said. Azrael died in the desert on the way to Las Vegas, Azrael said. He sat down at the other end of the sofa, the rifle laid carelessly across his knees. But Dave wasn't going to escape. He could feel the girl's breath on the back of his neck. His soul is in limbo, waiting to be reborn in a far country, to begin a new life. You had Serenity follow you to Nevada, Dave said. You dumped the van out there in that Veronica and doubled back here. He looked at Westover. It wasn't your ideal to apply for her insurance. It was theirs. They wanted the money to escape on. Westover sighed and nodded glumly. You didn't leave your house to avoid creditors, Dave said. These two brought you here. He glanced over his shoulder at Serenity. You remembered this place, Uncle Don's cabin in the woods. A good place to hide until the insurance company paid up. Too many neighbors down there, she said. Where is Gallard? Dave said. Westover made a sound and put his hands over his face. You want to see Gallard? Dave had thought Azrael's smile was wide before. It stretched wider now. He looked straight into Dave's eyes. The effect was like an electric shock, but less pleasant. Dave tensed to keep from shivering. Azrael jumped up off the couch, laid the rifle on the table, scratched a match on its blue cardboard box, and tilted the chimney of a lantern to set its wick afire. He picked up the lantern by its wire loop handle. Come with me. He went down the room, making a sound that might have been a chuckle. It resembled the noise hyenas make around a kill. Serenity's gun nudged Dave, and he moved after Azrael. Dave asked Westover, Why don't you run away? Westover's mouth twisted. Because if I try, he'll kill Serenity. Oh, he will. Oh, yes. And you too. Move, Serenity said, and Dave moved through a door Azrael had opened and down a short hallway, half-open doors on either hand, and through a kitchen strewn with empty cans and wrappers and stinking of garbage. The lantern swung in Azrael's hand. At a door that led outside, he turned back to give Dave another look from those insane pale eyes, and to make the hyena noise again. He was amused. He pushed out a screen door, and the lantern stair-stepped downward. Here were more of Gillard's sturdy steps. They ended in a puddle. The rain fell through the swinging nimbus of the lantern up ahead, sparkling. Dave stumbled on clods and rocks. Brush lashed his trousers, soaking them, chilling his legs. Branches slapped his face. He wiped the wet off his face with his hand. The land sloped off. Azrael had moved faster than they. The lantern stood on the ground, and Azrael moved in its glow for a second. Dave couldn't figure out what he was doing. Then he knew. He had a spade, and he was digging. Dave stopped. I don't want to see this, he said. You said you wanted to, Serenity said. Anyway, it doesn't matter what you want. All that matters is what he wants. That's all that matters in this world. You'll learn that. You'll be happy when you learn that. She jabbed him with the gun. Go on. Go on down there. And Dave shut his eyes. Thelma Gillard was looking up at him, pleading, wringing her hands. You'll find him now, won't you? You'll find Don. He opened his eyes and went on down to where Azrael was throwing heavy clods of mud to one side and making the hyena sound. He grinned at Dave. He wanted to see Gallard. He threw the spade aside and dropped to his knees and dug with his hands, scrabbled with his hands, like some animal after some other animal in a burrow. The glow of the lantern and the falling rain made it stranger, even than it was in Dave's mind. Cecil said, "This is weird." Asriel made a new sound, a long-drawn growl of satisfaction. He turned his sharp, small boy face up to Dave, his mad eyes with animal quickness. His hand caught Dave's and yanked Dave to his knees in the mud. Asriel grabbed the lantern and held it low over the hole he had dug. A face looked up at Dave, a face already eaten at by the things that live in the ground, waiting for such faces. But a face Dave knew, the face of Don Gallard. A terrible smell rose out of the hole. Dave turned away and vomited. "He wanted to see him," Asriel said. There was no expression in his voice. He got to his feet, set the lantern down, picked up the spade, and began filling up the hole again. "I wanted you to see him. I want you to believe in me." The wet earth sloped into the hole. "I want you to remember my deeds. By their fruits shall ye know them, all right? I always mean what I say." Mortals say he was panting a little with the effort it took to move the sodden earth. "I'll kill you," but they don't mean it. When the angel Asriel says, "I'll kill you," he means it. Behind and above were Dave, hung on hands and knees, trying to make his stomach stop convulsing. Serenity laughed. The spade slapped the wet earth. Dave felt splashes of mud from the grave. The spade rattled when Asriel tossed it aside again. Dave felt arms under his arms. He was lifted to his feet. He couldn't look at them in the lantern light. He kept his face averted as they climbed back to the cabin. In the main room, Charles Westover sat slumped on the couch. Just as they left him, he lifted his beaten eyes to Dave. They made me eat his heart," he said. "He wanted to help you," Dave said. "He loved you." Westover nodded. "I know." But it didn't appear to matter to him anymore. "He drove into the yard. I saw him from that window, smiling. He looked so happy." Tears were supposed to break in here. Westover waited for them, or seemed to, but they didn't come. He looked bitterly at Asriel. "He shot him over and over again. He didn't even have time to get out of his truck." He looked at Dave again. "You were lucky." "Is that what you call it?" Dave said. "Perverts," Asriel said. "Perverts." "I was glad my son was gone," Westover said. "When they came, I felt like thanking God that Lyle was gone." "Is he all right?" "He didn't kill himself, did he?" "He said he was going to kill himself." "It wasn't true, was it?" "It wasn't true," Dave said. "He's all right," Asriel said to Dave. "Sit down. You don't look very well. I don't want you to get sick. I've been waiting for you. I have plans for you. If you carry them out, I won't kill you. I won't even kill the pervert here. If you don't carry them out, I'll kill him." He sat opposite Dave at the table with the lamp on it. "And if you try to bring anybody else here, I'll kill them too." Dave felt sick about the message he'd left for Cecil. Asriel got up, went out of the circle of lamplight, came back dragging a wooden box the size of a milk crate. He shoved it with his foot to the edge of the circular braided rug that was under the table. The lamplight fell on it with a muddy shoe. Azrael lifted the loose lid. Ammo, he said. Between us, Serenity and me, we can kill 500 people before they kill us. His eyes fixed Dave again. We can, and we will. Remember that. What are these plans of yours? Dave said. You're going to telephone Mr. Lovejoy? The scrawny boy sat down again. At Banner Insurance Company, and tell him that you're in the hands of the angel, Azrael. I didn't see any phone lines leading up here. Serenity will drive you down to the crossroads, and you'll use the payphone in the booth outside the filling station. You won't try to run away or yell for help. You will deliver the message and come straight back to the car and straight back here, because I'll be timing you. And if you're late, I'll kill Mr. Westover, the same as I killed Mr. Gallard. I will put him in the same grave, and the two perverts can rot into each other and be one flesh forever and ever. Amen. Westover gave a soft moan from the couch. What's the message I give Lovejoy? Dave said. That the angel, Azrael, will kill you and bury you in a muddy hole, unless Banner Insurance Company pays him $100,000 in cash. New, unmarked bills. At 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you will pick up the money yourself from Mr. Lovejoy himself. He will bring it to the beach. Cormorant Cliffs? Nobody ever goes there. He will come alone after he has put the money in your hands. He will go back where he came from, and you will bring the money back here to me. If you don't, if you're even the least little bit late, I will kill Mr. Westover. If you do, if you come back on time, alone, I won't do anything to him. I won't do anything to you. And Serenity, Dave said. Serenity. Serenity will go away with me forever, Azrael said. Serenity crooned. In a great silver bird in the sky. Then she said sharply, Wait! She ran to the front window. Curtains were drawn across it. She stood with her back against the wall and, with a finger, made a gap between the edge of the curtain and the window frame. There was the slight rattle of Venetian blinds. Azrael had the rifle again. He was standing, pointing the rifle at the door. Someone's out there, in the trees, Serenity said. Azrael glared at Dave. Who did you tell? He didn't wait for an answer. He ran to the other front window, stood beside it, as Serenity stood beside hers, edged the curtain away, squinted out into the dark and rain. I don't see anything. Blow out the lamp. I heard a car stop in the road, Serenity said. I saw somebody moving the trees. Dave stood. He told Westover. Go into the kitchen. Westover simply stared at him. He didn't move. Azrael said. "Shut your mouth!" He gestured with the rifle barrel. "Blow out that fucking lamp." The lamp was all glass. A lot of kerosene was in the well. Dave picked up the lamp. Steps thumped on the porch. Cecil's voice called. "Dave!" Dave yelled at Westover. "Run!" And Westover's eyes opened wide and he jerked alive. He ran for the hall. The Venetian blinds clattered. Serenity had got the machine pistol caught in them. "Dave!" Cecil called outside in the rain. Azrael lunged for the door. "Cecil, hit the deck!" Dave shouted. Azrael tore open the door. With a knee, Dave tipped the table on its side. He slammed the burning lamp down hard into the crate of bullets and threw himself behind the tabletop. The light of the kerosene flared up and made the room bright. Azrael's rifle went off. Then the bullets in the crate began to go off. Crazily, in every direction, Serenity screamed. Crouched behind the table, Dave felt the thick wood jar and jumped from the force of the bullets. "Ah!" Azrael said. "Dave?" Cecil said. Something was wrong with his voice. A river of flame shot across the floor. Bullets shredded the curtains, shattered the frail blinds. The window glass, the couch began to burn, the ragged curtains above the couch. The bullets banged and ricocheted. Empty casings tinkled like rain. Spent lead rattled down. There was smoke and a strong smell of gunpowder. "Westover!" Dave shouted. "Run for help!" If there was an answer, he didn't hear it. He crouched behind the tabletop. Bullets kept slamming into it. He felt them strike hard. The wood splinter, smoke swirled. He got smoke in his lungs, convulsed with coughing. When he got over that, he glanced behind him. Azrael and Serenity lay sprawled in front of the open door. The boy across the girl, both face down. Blood had puddled around them. It shone bright red in the firelight. Dave blinked against the smoke, trying to see out the door. Fire climbed the walls by its light. He made out the soles of long shoes at the edge of the porch, in line with the door, as if Cecil had been struck just at the top of the steps and had fallen backward down the steps. Ah, Christ! The explosions of the bullets stopped, but the rafters were burning now, cracking, spitting down a rain of sparks, and it was hot. Too hot for him to stay here any longer. He started to straighten up, and more bullets exploded, and he crouched again. He crawled, keeping flat as he could, the side of his face rubbing the floor. His head struck the softness of the children's bodies. Their blood wetted his face. He tried to push them ahead of him out the door, but they were heavy, and he couldn't get purchase. He lay coughing, bullets whining over him, expecting at any second one of them to drill into him. Then a rafter fell. He didn't see it. It was behind him, but he heard its roar and felt the jar of its weight through the floor under him. He lunged over the bodies, struck the porch, and rolled, screamed at the pain in his shoulder. He scrambled into the shelter of the cabin wall beside the door and hunched there, coughing, panting. His clothes were sweaty, and in the sudden cold he shivered. The bullets stopped exploding. He waited. There might still be more. There didn't seem to be more. Now there was only the crackle and roar of the flames inside the cabin. He crept on knees and one hand and, flinching in the fire heat, dragged Azrael onto the porch and across the porch. Westover stood below the porch, staring. "Take him down into the trees," Dave said. Serenity's hair, jeans, and sweater were burning. When he dragged her out, he beat out the small flames with his hand. He dragged her to the porch edge. Westover came for her and carried her away. His feet went out from under him, and he sat down in the mud. the girl in her scorched and smoking clothes lying across him. He struggled from under her. Even under the noise of the fire, Dave could hear him sob. Somehow he staggered to his feet with the girl in his arms and bore her away into the rainy darkness. Dave dropped from the porch to the ground. He swayed for a second with the pain in his shoulder. He saw the shadowy Westover lay the girl down and kneel beside her. Dave knelt beside Cecil. The boy was covered with blood. Dave laid fingers on his neck, under the hinge of his jaw. Flames were licking out the front windows of the cabin. He dragged Cecil away from the cabin and then ran, skidding down to Westover. Westover looked up at him, face wet from more than just the rain. "She's dead," he said. He stretched out beside her in the mud, put his arms around her, and laid his head on her breast. "No, no," he said. "No, no." Back of them, the cabin roof fell in. It gave a hoarse roar. Sparks and flame reached up into the rain, lighting the tall pines and pine oaks with a nightmare orange glow. Dave stepped around Westover and his dead girl and crouched by Azrael. There was no need to feel for a pulse in this boy's neck. A red, ragged hole as big as a fist had opened in his forehead. His strange pale eyes looked straight up into the rain that fell upon them. Dave reached across and shook Westover's shoulder. Westover raised his head. His eyes were open, but he wasn't seen. "I'm sorry," Dave said, "but I burned my one good hand. I don't think I can drive." He climbed to his feet and, hurting the blistered hand, dug into the pocket of his ruined jacket for his keys. He held them out to Westover, who blinked at them for a few seconds, as if he didn't know what they were, then wiped his running nose on his sleeve, took the keys, and got up off the ground. Dave said, "One phone call. To get fire, paramedics, ambulance, the works." Westover's face twisted. "But she's dead," he said. "They're both dead." "Not the black boy," Dave said. "The one who came to the door. He's alive, and I'd like for him to stay that way. My car is the Jaguar. A little way down to the road. Can you hurry, please?" Westover looked at the key in his hand. He looked at Dave. Something cleared in his eyes. He nodded and began to run, slipping in the mud, stumbling over roots, down through the trees and the dark rain, toward the road. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.